So this comes from AC Grayling, and he really built himself up to be like one of the voices of the pro-Remain campaign. And I think what he says here is completely right. Sooner or later, the UK and its components parts will rejoin the EU. It's only a matter of how and when. So, will the UK or its countries of the British Isles, if the UK separates into its currently constitutional parts, rejoin the European Union? The answer is an emphatically yes. The real questions are how and when. I address the how question below, for there is indeed a way, and one that brings rejoining far closer than most people will dare to believe, and thus answering when also. To the when question by itself, without the how to be described, there are also the alternative answers. If Scotland succeeds for the United Kingdom, it will rejoin the EU quickly. If we do nothing in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, or if it's still intended, still a united UK, but let time and events take their course. It will be a decade or more before rejoining becomes an active possibility. But if we work at rejoining in ways that I'll be discussed in the how part of this article, it could be as soon as the immediate aftermath of the next election, and thus the next election is 4 years away, not 5. Few city governments take the risk of waiting until the last minute for an election, but try to have it at a moment most sorry, a most advantageous to themselves, which they typically try to arrange in the fourth year of Parliament. I do not say we could rejoin the EU in the immediate aftermath of the next election, because I think that Labour or the other opposition parties will, if left to themselves, also have reorganised and rebooted that they can beat the Conservatives, and that they will do so on a rejoin platform. Nor do I think that a new party is the answer. The current constitutional arrangements rule that out. So neither scenario is very likely. If the opposition parties are left to themselves, um, um, the opposition part too are likely to perish into bad political habits, but that have left us in the situation that we are now in. Tribalism, adversarialism, the winner takes all parliamentary mathematic of the toxic British type. But if the opposition parties are not left to themselves, the desired scenario, namely beating the Conservatives at the next election and seeing a reform and rejoin agenda implemented, this can indeed happen. For it to happen, we need to work. For this to work, I've said how it will happen below. But before getting to that explanation, we need to note that thereafter, and bear in mind the following facts for facts as they are hard facts, and that they are what makes rejoining the EU inevitable. In the general election of December 2019, the number of people who voted for parties supporting Remain, or at least a second referendum, numbered 16.5 million. The combined figure for the Conservative Party, Brexit, and the UK, UKIP, totaled 14.7 million. That suggests a split of 53 for Remain, a second referendum, as against a 74 pro-Brexit. But I suspect that figure will be likely 55 or more versus 45 or less because of the Corbyn factor. These are a number of people decided that Brexit is the lesser evil in comparison to a Corbyn-led government. Doorstep experience by canvassers and post-election inquiries bear this out. Add these numbers to the fact that the majority for Remain increases dramatically as one goes down in age and scale. Demographics alone are a powerful pro-EU factor. Therefore, the current pro-EU majority in the country is set to continue to increase. The turnout in the 2019 election was 67.3, which on the foregoing numbers means that more than 70% of the total British electorate didn't vote for the Conservatives. Because of the dramatic distorting effect of the first past the post electoral system, the Conservative Party nevertheless won a majority of 80 seats in the House of Commons, having been in a minority of 41 in the previous Parliament. The Conservatives gained an extra 330,000 voters in 2019 against their 2017 total. Yet, in 2017, the result was a hung Parliament, while the 2019 this modest number of extra voters delivered an 80-seat majority to the Conservatives. The Liberal Democrats gained an extra 1.3 million votes, yet ended up with only one fewer seat. Note that this is a third of a million extra votes than got the Conservatives an 80-seat majority, while the 1.3 million extra voters got the Liberal Democrats one fewer seat. So, on the 43.6 total of votes cast, the Conservatives won 54% of the seats in the House of Commons. This is the freak action of the first past the post system. It screams at us that reform of our electoral system is urgent. Until now, the two main parties, meaning those favoured by the system, have not wished to abandon it because small swings can give them big majorities. It can do what it likes, using the whipping system and political careerism to ensure that MPs stay loyal, making them little more than lobber fodder for the government to get its agenda through. Only when a government does not have a majority in the House of Commons, as in the period of 2017-19, does parliamentary democracy begin to be effective. Add up all those considerations and you'll see that the FTP system is extremely, indeed dangerous, undemocratic, giving a distorted and disproportionate reflection of a voter sentiment and wishes, and delivering overwhelming power to a government with a majority of seats through a minority of support, and therefore the enacting policies not desired by the majority. Brexit itself is a classic case in point. Electoral reform is unlikely to come from either of the two main parties. If it did, and an election were to be held on a proportional representation system, Brexit would be stopped and rejoin would happen in an instant. But although there is an intimate connection between electoral and indeed constitutional reform and rejoining the EU, there is no hope that rejoining will be achieved by first achieving electoral reform. Instead, we need another and better route for both. One final point to note is that on January 31st, 2020 is not Brexit Day. It is the date on which the transition to Brexit begins, which we've pointed out many times before. This is just the beginning of the beginning. If Johnson agrees with the EU negotiating position that the UK should be closely aligned as possible with the EU to make trade relationships fair, the alignment being subjected to the European Court of Justice determinations on observance of the rules, and he can get his deal before the end of 2020, and that deal will be as if in the EU, but without a say. And no doubt the ERG and Farage and his Brexit party will be very unpleased by that. If no deal is reached and the UK crashes out into a WTO desert, the impact on the UK economy will be drastic. All those fears, the fearmongers as Brexit call them, about empty supermarkets, endless queues, lorries for Dover, and full food rotting, disruption lines caused because of the supply chain breakdowns and the like, we will be back with a vengeance. So now the question of how. With a majority of 80 for the Johnson government, the Parliament is dead. It is a zombie Parliament, overwhelmed by Johnson's Cummings lobby fodder. The opposition parties are powerless. The interests of the majority of the people in the country are unrepresented there. A Conservative large majority Parliament is not going to act in the interests of a country, but only of itself and, without a doubt, its financial backers. The Parliament debates will achieve nothing because the will of the government will override all. Parliament is now an extensive charade. There are some excellent people in it who will speak out, oppose and defy the argument from the principle and with knowledge, but they will have scarcely any effect on what happens. Therefore, we need an alternative. We need citizens' assemblies to form all around the country to debate and critique what the government is doing to articulate to the interests and the will of the people, to invite local MPs to be questioned, grilled and held to account, and to pass resolutions, to listen to local people and to discuss with them, to disassemble facts against the tsunami of falsehood and the deception of pouring in from social media and the tabloid press. In short, to become vehicles for genuine democracy. I sort of agree to a point, but it's how are you going to get MPs to do that? That's the real question. So grassroots Remain groups around the country need to be one of the active voices in the Citizens' Assembly, keeping the EU membership case alive and powerful. Johnson wants the word Brexit to be dropped from public discourse in order to give the impression that it's all over, rather than in fact it's just beginning. The word was an effective tool for the Brexiteers. It must now become an albatross around their necks, vigorously used by Remainers/Rejoiners as they campaign. The Conservatives' FPT win does not make the rightful demand for a final say on any deal or no deal go away. A campaign for a final say, a people's vote or referendum must continue and grow. It is our right and our democratic imperative in our precarious circumstances. The principal motivation for citizens' assemblies is the lack of democratic legitimacy of this parliament because of the electoral system. The parliament that has emerged from the 2019 general election is even more obviously and dramatically underrepresentative than parliaments usually are. Citizens' assemblies are now therefore necessary. Consider the significance of databases, of issues raised and ideas put forward by citizens all around the country. Think of citizens' assemblies requiring local MPs to attend and be quizzed, not merely in their surgeries, seeing a few dozen people, but having to answer to an assembly of local people. This does not happen anywhere near enough. MPs might do a few hustings meetings at an election time in which they rehearse the party manifesto and make vague promises. But the town hall type of meeting in which politicians are held to account by local people needs to become a regular, more incisive means for democracy at the grassroots level to express itself and gain traction. There will be this will be a revival of the local press and to report and inform the citizenry in the area of their assembly. Imagine the effect this could have on the benefits of citizens' assemblies being set up by citizens themselves around the country. Imagine the assemblies providing opposition to government moves to weaken our democracy and prevent the courts providing remedies for government misconduct. Politicizing the civil service, engineering the economy to serve the interests of the rich, which we know is in their agenda, because they only think of the kind of economy that favours the wealthy, not the kind of society that is for everyone. Imagine a continuing voracious demand for any deal to be put to the people for a final say, or say of acceptance or rejoin. Imagine MPs being regularly held to account by local people. And imagine that all these provides the basis for, namely, a major opportunity to persuade, even force, opposition parties to form a united front for the next election. Not a coalition or a new party, but a one-off national interest united endeavour to oust the Conservatives and achieve an agenda for electoral reform and for another say on EU membership. A united front for parties properly organised by everyone from the grassroots level to party leaderships would win the next election on a commitment to put that reforming democratic agenda into effect. Johnson's and Cummings would never listen to citizens' assemblies. They would use their usual strategy of misleading on social and tabloid media to discredit them. But, in fact, this would play directly into the hands of the citizens' assembly movement. How could the opposition parties ignore the demands and pressures of citizens' assemblies? They will be a crucial part of the base for parties of the party's base for their own support. Moreover, their continued insistence on a final say provides opposition parties with a reason to cooperate and to benefit from the fact that such an option has an ever-growing majority support in the community in the country. Remember demographics, a factor that no intelligent opposition politician could overlook, even if she even if he or she did not care about the principles at stake. The chief purposes of a citizens' assembly movement, therefore, are these. First, to provide a democratic forum now that the Parliament is a zombie institution, a mere facade for the Johnsons, Cummings, Downing Street. Second, to continue campaigning for a final say on EU membership, which is our right and a clear, obvious democratic imperative. Third, to urge a united front for opposition parties to combine properly for the next election on an agenda to reform the electoral system and to hold another referendum on EU membership. This then is the how, and it could really work. All the energy, commitment, and dedication in the Remain movements around the country is still there, and its numbers are swelling. We must use that energy and desire and take all the awful circumstances of those last 3 years and get a grip on our national destiny and remake ourselves for the 21st century as a great European state. The Brexit nightmare could be over in 5 years. Footnote: the Remain cause came very close to succeeding in November 2019. Very, very close. Opposition parties made a fatal error in agreeing to a general election. They could have forced a government of national unity and held a referendum on EU membership to get that question completely out of the way, so the country could reboot. Johnson would have been foiled and probably would have been the shortest serving ever Conservative leader. The project of a national unity government was foiled by the toxin of personal and political apathies, of vanities and ambitions. No one could accept Corbyn as temporary leader, and Corbyn would not step aside to let someone acceptable to all sides lead a temporary unitary administration. Although I'd argue, as the leader of the largest part of the coalition, that should have been his right. That's how it works in other countries that don't have first past the post system. So I disagree with Grayling on that. And thus, alas, putting himself before the interests of the country. In agreeing to an election, both Labour and the Liberal Democrats knew that in our absurd system, a few 100,000 changed votes could give the Conservatives an outright majority for dozens of seats. But they thought that the same weird arithmetic might just do them a favour too, and they risked an entire country's future on that gamble. Corbyn continued to put personal ambition before the national interest, although I disagree with that, once it was clear how unpopular he was on the doorstep. By not stepping aside, he was a lead weight around the party's neck, with policies on Europe that he and fellow Lexiters thought would retain Lexit support in the party, whereas the result was that they alienated both Remainers, the vast majority of the party, and Lexiters, a minority. Many of us voted Labour tactically with gritted teeth because of the dithering and equivocal policy, but that the rest of the Corbyn and his group being Lexiters at odds with the bulk of the party. Labour never made a passionate, clear, explanatory case about the base about how Brexit would hurt them the most, which we need to be doing, and I will continue doing how Brexit is hurting my area and the surrounding area. That was the failure of the moral and political leadership, a betrayal of the interests of the very people whom the party is meant to stand. There should be a determining factor in the choice for a new leadership team. A citizens' assembly movement, a movement for the people, not the parties, could, among its other benefits, induce a change in the political culture and the constitutional agreements for our country, factors which have failed us disastrously and are no longer acceptable. And I agree. I think our electoral system is completely busted. As he makes the point there, I think we need to continuously campaign to reform our system to something, to a proportional representation. I think that is the most logical step. I think it's something that we could definitely achieve.